Yeah, I mean, Manny's saying that there is not depth at Miami right now, or to the point where you have backups fighting for starting jobs. That's true. That's what we've said. Even if you look at the blue chip ratio, it's the cream of the crop is at the top of the roster. And the depth is not there. That championship caliber depth is not there on the roster. Everybody sees that. Everybody said that. Manny's not saying anything new. What he was saying is, when you have depth at every position, then you have younger guys fighting to start. And the easy comparison is like, 2001. Frank Gore is your fourth string running back. Frank Gore, who's now third all time in NFL rush yards. You know what I mean? He's behind Clinton Portis and Willis McGahee, Najee Davenport, things like that. Miami's not there. And we know that. But that should not be what keeps Miami from beating FIU. That's the thing that everybody is ignoring. People are talking about, Cam, it's not about perfection. Apparently it is, because perfection was needed to beat FIU. What if you come out and play consistently every single week? This is what I was talking about. The Miami team that played against Louisville, they score 80, literally, because they already scored 52 against Louisville. They score 80 against FIU. If that same team with that same effort, motivation, dedication to excellence shows up, but they don't. So yeah, there is not championship caliber depth. So Manny, it's on you then to get the guys who are game ready, who are your starting level players, who have been in ACC games, all ACC second to third team, maybe honorable mention, guys who have played and made big plays in big spots and big games here. It's your job to get them ready to play to that level. It is not necessarily, you gotta be a self-starter. You gotta be out there and not just BS around. You gotta go out there, you gotta make plays. But Justin DeTavio, one of our guys, he says at State of the U, he says it all the time. He says your team will do one of two things: what you coach them to do or what you allow them to do. So you're either coaching them to be lackadaisical and give this half-assed effort, or you're allowing it. And I don't want to hear anything different. It's one of them two things. You can debate amongst yourselves, ye who are listening, which one it is. But no, I don't care the championship caliber depth. We did not lose to Alabama this week, guys. What are we talking about? Miami lost to FIU, and we're talking about not having championship caliber depth. With guys on their team who Miami recruited as like D-level options, fourth and fifth options on the recruiting trail. Guys who couldn't hold a jockstrap at Miami. Guys who dreamed of this moment because they were passed over, because they're not those kind of players. And this is what we're talking about. Do you see why I'm angry? Do you see why I am crazy here? That you are equating not having championship caliber effort or championship caliber depth to not being able to be successful against FIU football.
I can understand the anger, the frustration, and everything that was displayed right there by any reasonable fan, not expecting the world or leaps and bounds over what we saw last season, but expecting improvement and expecting that there not be letdowns against this kind of an opponent. That again, if you take, and it didn't really hit me until it came out of my mouth a few minutes ago, and then you expounded on it, that Miami's not a great football team. They're really not a very good football team right now, but they're a talented roster that on occasion, basically, again, within the conference, they took the three best opponents on the schedule: Virginia, Louisville, and Pitt. Those are, I don't think there's any question, those are the three best teams within the conference on the schedule, and they won those games. They weren't pretty. They weren't dominant, especially in two games. They barely scored 16 and 17 points, but their defense was dominant in those games. So they showed us in those games that they should win the Coastal Division. That if they show up, and every team's going to have a letdown or two during the season, but typically if they're as talented or there's that gap, they can usually get by, maybe not all the time. There are upsets that occur, but now I made the statement last week that I was almost sure, without scanning the nation completely, almost positive that Miami was the only team in the nation that had lost two games in which they were at least a 2-touchdown favorite Now they've lost 3 games in which they were at least a 2-touchdown favorite. In 2 of those, a 20-plus point favorite.
There's 4 games that Miami has not been within 2 scores of the line. There's 3 games now that Miami has not been within 3 scores of the line. Miami beats this season Bethune-Cookman. I know they're an FCS team, but they're like an 8-win team at their level. Central Michigan rebounded really well this year under Jim McElwain. That's a 7-win team. Miami beat them. Virginia, currently ranked 20th when we played them. That's a good team. Pittsburgh, that's a winning team. Florida State, dumpster trash, but whatever. But still, they're a bowl-eligible team now. Louisville, that's a developing team. That's a winning team. Right, exactly. So these are the teams that Miami has beaten. Go look at the teams that Miami's lost to. FIU, trash. Georgia Tech, trash. North Carolina and Florida, and this is where I went back and just went through the schedule, because the stat that I saw is Miami has not lost to a sub 500 team this year. But you have Florida and North Carolina in their respective season openers. So that kind of skews it. So those teams, I mean, North Carolina decidedly average, but Miami average to bad. And Florida, is a top 15, 10-ish team. But you lose by a field goal, played decently well. Yeah, there were things to work on, like the offensive line. But Miami just continues to find, Virginia Tech was on the verge of firing Justin Fuente before you saved his job, just like Al Golden used to save Mike London's job at Virginia previously by losing to a bad team then. It is just confounding to see the kind of inconsistency with, you're talking about potentially ending the season on a 6-game winning streak. You had 3, you had a bye week. You could have 2 here. You're not going to the ACC championship game. Then you can win a bowl game against a, mid-tier, upper-tier, opponent. You're, tweeting about recruiting as Manny Diaz and the whole staff. You're doing all these things. But again, 3 steps forward, 10 steps back. Like, this game is, the loss to FIU is so gigantic in a huge way. And I cannot overstate how poor that is and how badly Miami finds ways to play. Even just in the last half of this season, Virginia Tech was about to fire Justin Fuente. You turn the ball over 4 times in the first 22 snaps, spot them a 28-point lead, and you lose that game. Georgia Tech is still garbage, and you find a way to lose that game. You lose to FIU, terrible. As Mr. Wright says, they gave up 400 yards rushing alone to FAU the week before and getting blown out by 30 points. It is terrible. It is terrible. It is terrible. And the analogy that I use for this, Manny Diaz, for part of this, I'm going to get to the flopping in a second. The Manny Diaz noted yesterday in his Monday pressers that he's trying to change things up during the bye weeks to change the performance. He said he's already changed things in both of the second and third bye weeks of this year. So you lose to North Carolina after 1 bye. You change things before the Virginia Tech week. In that bye, you lose again. You change things before of FIU, and you lose again. When I was a first-year teacher, and I was starting out and trying to figure out my way, leading a program for the first time, stepping up into the big job, I did not even have a bag of tricks or tricks in the bag of tricks. I didn't even have a bag to put tricks in. We are seeing Manny Diaz in that same way. It's not even that he can go to another thing. Oh, I'm going to try that. I don't know where he's getting it from, but I mean, he needs professional development, obviously. But he doesn't even have a bag to put the tricks in that he can go and try. And the only other person on the staff who's been a head coach before at the college level is Todd Stroud. Who are you talking to? Where are you getting your advice from? Who can come into the office and say, hey, Manny, when you remember, and this is part of being a first-time head coach, not even first-time head coach. Who can come into the office and say, when I was at Middle Tennessee State as head coach, this, when you remember when you coached elsewhere, or who can come and say that? Nobody. There's no one on the staff literally who has that kind of experience. So I don't care whether it's mentoring. I don't care whether it's Miami And obviously it's a private school, so the numbers are different. But Miami following the Alabama route and saying we're going to hire some of these head coaches who are out of work as analysts or something and bring them in. You know what I mean? I don't know where it's going to come from, but professional development is definitely needed because 6-5 with this schedule this year, with this roster, with this talent, it is fireable. And I mean, look, Manny Diaz is not going to get fired, but if some assistants aren't gone after this year, and assistants plural, Manny Diaz is going to be on a short leash moving forward. Watch.